moving on, just for the sake of time, because we've been here for a while, and I know you probably have to go home to your wife, and she's probably gonna be very upset at you for doing a 2-hour show.
Yeah, I definitely been getting text messages, so
We're gonna hurry this up. We're not gonna go in depth on the Singapore card, that's for sure. But Ben Askren, quick question: is he overrated? Has the air quote trade for Demetrius Johnson been a complete failure? And
no, I don't think it's been a complete failure. I think if any, the only person who hasn't enjoyed this trade has been Askren, and in the meantime, he's
me.
No, you've enjoyed it.
I haven't.
You've enjoyed it. You enjoyed the Robbie Lawler fight, didn't you? That was a damn good time, wasn't it? You enjoyed Masvidal kneeing his head into the rafters, didn't you?
Do you know what I would enjoy more? Is Demetrius Johnson still at flyweight and fighting Henry Cejudo for a trilogy fight. Then,
of course, that would have been fantastic.
That's what I would like more.
But you enjoyed watching the Askren Maya fight, didn't you? It was a good fight.
I did not enjoy watching that. No.
I mean, the striking was god awful, but the grappling exchanges were fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
But man, the striking exchanges.
Oh, those spinning back fists. Oh.
Ben Askren is probably the most unathletic person that's ever been an athlete and achieved the levels of accomplishments that he has done, right? I forget the award he won in collegiate wrestling, but it's one of the highest awards you can win. This guy has achieved things in his life. A UFC belt's not going to be one of them, obviously, but God, he is not an athlete, and that is quite obvious here. Damian Maia was the exponentially better athlete than Ben Askren, and that is terrifying. But you didn't answer this question. Is Ben Askren overrated?
No, I don't think he's overrated. Because I think the curiosity around him coming into the UFC was, what was he going to be able to accomplish? It was a question mark. It wasn't a definitive statement. There weren't a whole lot of people that were out there saying, "Oh, when Ben Askren gets to the UFC, he's going to steamroll everybody." There weren't too many people, at least too many people who are reputable saying that. And then also too, let's factor in that Ben Askren, Ben Askren could have benefited from being in the UFC sooner. It would have forced him to develop better. When he got the one championship, man, it was paint by numbers. He was on cruise control the whole time. He didn't have to evolve because there wasn't any real challenges for him there. I think also too, we should keep in mind that when he came over to the UFC, this was a guy who was already enjoying retirement. The reason why one was letting him sign over to the UFC is because he said he wasn't fighting anymore. He was on the shelf. So a guy who was comfortable in his retirement and operating his other businesses and helping coach and everything, and you call him off the couch and you say, "Hey, here's a fat check. Go talk some trash and take some people down." Okay, sign me up. And we see the results. I think if we had this, say if Ben Askren came over to the UFC after vacating the Bellator belt, as we initially thought was going to happen, or even if he took Dana's suggestion to go over the World Series of Fighting, and then he came over to the UFC, we might be having a different conversation because it would have forced him. We might have, because it would have forced him to evolve some. It would have kicked things up.
But gun to your head, yes or no? Would it have though? Do you honestly think if Ben Askren, let's say not even World Series Fighting, came when he left Bellator, when he was honestly in his prime in a sense, right? Had just beat what was it? Was it Douglas Lima and Jay Haran by dominating fashion, right? I'm trying to remember his Bellator run now.
Or was it Heron? I'm gonna look it up right now. His last Bellator fight.
But anyways, I mean he looked good, but I mean obviously there was people back then far more than what it was when he did eventually go to the UFC that were saying this is the best welterweight on the planet. Do you think that if he did go to the UFC that this run would not have looked this way? That he would have actually picked up far more wins, been a legit title contender, even maybe win a belt? Do you think that would have happened actually if he went to the UFC 5 years ago?
I don't know. I mean, I look at what happened with Jake Shields. And Jake Shields is a guy with kind of similar. Jake Shields had championships in every other promotion that he fought in, and a very similar style. A guy who certainly was not being called by K1 to make an appearance at any point, but he was able to get the job done repeatedly against some top names. And you look at what Ben Askren's resume, at least from Bellator, and those names age pretty damn well. Douglas Lima and Koreshkov, Lyman Good, even like there's some names in there. Was like, okay, that's pretty legit. I do think like if Ben Askren came over and had a fight like Jake Shields had against Martin Kampmann, to kind of bridge the gap with a guy who's favorable enough style matchup. Say you put in Ben Askren against a Carlos Condit, we might be talking a different story about Ben Askren. He may not have. It would have been enough to get him. If a win over someone like Condit at that time might have been enough to get him a title shot. The results of that title shot are what they are, and we say, hey, we saw it. It's also, but he was able to come to the UFC and do something.
Also, I feel like now that we're talking about 2013 welterweight division, damn, it seems like a completely different division.
Mm-hmm. And it seems I was trying to think of names to,
and it was one like Johnny Hendricks was probably a champion around that time, or like Robbie
and
Lawler.
Him and Johnny Hendricks had like a legitimate feud with one another.
Yeah, back in wrestling days. Yeah,
they really dislike each other. That would have been something.
It makes me think that, man, this welterweight division we have now, while definitely, I would say less quality in terms of name value, right, than the Carlos Condit, the Jake Shields, the Robbie Lawlers, the George St. Pierre, like that era was stacked in terms of just names. This welterweight division is stacked in terms of just talent and skill.
Oh yeah, just
like Leon Edwards is a more complete fighter than a lot of the guys circa 2013.
Yeah, or as Santiago Ponzinibbio, who nobody ever talks about.
Like you put Ponzinibbio in 2013 and he would run through 170. He would beat Carlos Condit, beat Robbie Lawler, beat Jake Shields, beat Johnny Hendricks. He's gonna beat all those guys probably
until you get to GSP. But like or Woodley or something. That's when you kind of
even Woodley back then wasn't firing. Like Woodley was getting out kickboxed by Jake Shields around that time.
He wasn't getting out kickboxed. Jake Shields like grappled him against the fence that whole fight.
No, you need to go back and watch the fight. That was he won that fight via leg kicks.
Those garbage. Okay,
I'm not saying they did any damage, but
he did. Most of it was against.
He threw 200 leg kicks in a 3-rounder fight. Like I don't know if that number is true. I'm just saying.
I'm pretty sure that isn't true.
Like if you throw 300 leg kicks,
I get your point.
Yeah, when you throw 1,000 leg kicks, you're gonna win a fight, guaranteed. But anyways,